The following is a conversation with Professor Jon Davey and Cornelius Crane. In this episode, we visit Carbondale, Illinois to learn everything about the life of Mr. Buckminster Fuller.
One of the coolest things about this conversation is actually how it happened. So, how it happened was I posted an essay on Reddit. One of the coolest things about the internet is that if you want to know the answer about something, you post the wrong answer and someone out there will correct you. So, I posted the essay about Buckminster Fuller and someone, a random person on the internet, says, "You're wrong." And I tell him, "Okay, please correct me. Let me know how I can get to the truth." So a few days later, we ended up getting on a phone call, talked for 4 hours. In the same weekend, he invites us down to Carbondale, where we record this interview that you're about to see. And really, what you should take away from this conversation, besides the inspiration from Buckminster Fuller, is the power of following your curiosity without hesitation and the power of serendipity. Once you just focus on just learning things, focus on the intrinsic value of things, and you just let your intuition and curiosity flow.
We now invite you to the house of Mr. Buckminster Fuller, and we hope that you enjoy this conversation. Thank you.
So supposedly Bucky calculated how many clothes he had to have on to walk into Lake Michigan and drown and take him down. And somehow, as the legend has it, the story goes, he had one of those aha moments, like St. Paul on the road to Damascus when Jesus talks to him, or the Buddha under the Bodhi tree when he received enlightenment. Bucky said that the universe spoke to him, that you don't belong to yourself, you belong to the universe. And upon that, he decided to commit egocide, not suicide, and dedicated. This is really heady. He was going to solve humanity's problems. I mean, that's pretty crazy in one way. Let me stop for a second here. The first time I came across Bucky, I was in Grafenwehr. I had been drafted. I was the last to draft. I didn't have to go to Vietnam. And Grafenwehr is a big tank base in Germany. And usually it's either the mud is this deep or the dust is this deep. And we lived in tents. And on the base was a Christian coffee house. And they had three things that I wanted: out of the dust and mud, good coffee, and girls. Because I was in a combat ready and there were no females at all around. And when I was there was a big poster on the wall with a big dandelion. And you should see, you should buy it at the Student Center. And proper or improper, to me, God is not a noun but a verb. And in one way, that sounds like Scientology, but that was my first experience. The second time was I'd come back to Southern Illinois out of the military. I was going to Red Lake College. I had a good friend named Elizabeth Bork, and I had a $250 Pontiac Tempest. Then on the passenger side, there was a hole this big that you could see the ground. So Elizabeth said, "Let's come down and hear Buckminster Fuller speak." So we came down to hear him speak in 1976, in the spring of 76. He was doing a tour around the country at that time. And it's at Schwack Auditorium. It was packed. And Bucky spoke not for one, not for two, not for three, not for four, not for five, but 6 straight hours without stopping. And he kind of sounded like Mr. Magoo. And since I had at that time read nothing about him, it would just everything went past me. I remember him playing with the spheres and talking about these foam core spheres and what have you. Then the next time I came across anything Bucky-wise, I had been married, I had a child. The recession had gone on. I was working in an architecture firm, and there was a house for sale, a dome by Crab Orchard Lake. And a guy named Ed Cook had come down here. He had gotten out of the Navy. A young man. He had come down here just to study under Bucky, and only realizing that Bucky had left 2 years earlier. But Ed built this dome. And so I'm there, I'm looking at the dome itself, and it has this nice star pattern window. Everything's custom there. And they wanted $25,000 for it. And I looked at it, and the other thing I observed, that when you're in that dome, if you're standing right there, everybody hears everything. There is no acoustic privacy at all.
Right.
But on the other hand, I could probably get a transistor radio, hang it from up there, and this would all sound like a Bose speaker. So I decided if I was going to buy that dome, I'd have to buy Ed Cook for the rest of the life of the dome, because that's the only person who could fix it. And Ed is the gentleman who did all the insides in here. Okay, just kind of put this together. Jumping back down to one more funny story. I looked next door, and there was this lumpy concrete on the ground next to Ed's house, dome. I said, "What is all that?" And he goes, "Oh, a bunch of hippie dippies decided they're going to build their own dome. So they ordered a load of concrete, so many yards of concrete. No preparation for the ground. No boards at all to contain the concrete in there. Just pour it on the ground. And then they put PVC pipes in there, tied them together, put chicken wire on it, and then put a sprayed urethane insulation on the outside of it. But then they put a stove inside with a pipe going through the urethane. Well, it caught fire and burnt to the ground. But that's kind of the hippy-dippy thing back then. Back to Bucky. So Bucky then gets back, and Ann and Bucky are living in an apartment. They had left an expensive apartment, got to a cheaper one. The next door neighbor, they noticed, always carried a gun on him. He was one of Al Capone's band, but he liked Bucky and Ann, and they felt safe with him. But Bucky then, for 2 years, didn't work and did question everything. He believed also that he had telepathy with with Alexandra, and also Allegra, his daughter here. Okay. Then he started speaking and lecturing and thinking. And during that time, he read about great inventors like Leonardo da Vinci and others like that. And Bucky questioned everything. He didn't become a cynic. A cynic is a pissed off skeptic. He's more of a skeptic kind of thinker. And then he started going around and expressing his thoughts to people. One of the breakthroughs came that one of the Josef Albers, one of the Bauhaus teachers from Germany, and his wife started tried to start a Bauhaus school, but in North Carolina in Black Mountain. They were going to invite Bernard Goldberg, I'll get his name straight, the gentleman who designed Marina Towers in Chicago that looked like corn cobs. Right. And he couldn't make that summer's work, but he says, I know an up-and-coming young inventor, Buckminster Fuller. So Bucky went there and introduced them to his thinking and building with shapes and stuff. And there's a picture of Bucky's biggest failure there. They tried to use the thin Venetian blinds and use that as the struts. Well, it just collapsed on itself. There was no rigidity in it whatsoever. I think he taught there for 2 years. And during that time, he was still traveling around giving lectures. And he went to Illinois Institute of Technology and hit it off with a gentleman, Al Rowan. And Al Rowan was a student then. He was later hired by Dean Shryock, who was the dean of Fine Art School, because they wanted to start a design program here at SIU. So he came down and started the design program. Then Bucky was in New York, and while he was in New York, he hung out at
Madame Romany's?
Yeah, Madame Romany. She was kind of a bohemian.
Bohemian.
And she would she would feed him during the Depression and let him drink as long as he would talk to people, because people wanted to talk to him all the time. And he met people like Noguchi, the gentleman who designed, and T.S. Eliot, the writer. So it was kind of it was the Soho hangout for intellectuals. Then Bucky's apartment caught fire and all his models were burned up. So he had contacted Al in the design department, asked if he had students that could help rebuild the models. He said, "Come on down." Well, he came down, and somehow he was able to land, and I've seen the contract, land a job as a visiting lecturer for $3,000 a month, which is not bad in the 50s. And so then things changed, and with Dwight Morris, the president, was trying to put SIU on the map. At one time, we had 24,000 students here. I mean, we were saying about the presence in Vietnam and Kabul, and he wanted to bring unique people in to push SIU. So Bucky then was awarded a research professorship, which I've never heard that ever at SIU. But he was responsible to be on campus. I think 2 months at a time or 2 weeks at a time, and it didn't have to be contiguous. And at the same time that he went around the world just giving lectures. But that was 1960. Ann is here with him. He decides he's going to put his money where his mouth is, hires Ira and Paul Parrish, as Corey was talking about. They cast the slab. This is radiant floor heating. It still works today. We'll look at the copper pipes in just a second. Some people say that he brought students in to help erect the prefabricated dome. All the pictures I see, they look like workmen to me, but I don't know.
Don Moore was here. Some of those pictures are Don Moore took, but Ira had his people. You wouldn't have. It wasn't the kind of thing you'd want to bring people and just say, come out. But everyone probably came around and stood around and watched what's happening because it was so close to the university. There were only 2 blocks?
Yeah.
2 blocks from the university. So, but
they put it up, and then they put the redwood fence all the way around it, and it actually turned and covered part of the driveway too, and that was for modesty and privacy because Anne was here by herself. Legler had already left home by that time.
I thought I'd read somewhere that there was almost like a law, there was like an ordinance that this property had to have the fence around it.
Oh, really?
The people didn't want to see the dome.
Oh, wow.
I'll have to when I first started looking into the ordinances, because I wrote the zoning so we can have a home museum here. And I saw something that was like, really? It said that this property had to have a fence around it 6 foot high so people didn't have to see it. I'll double check that. I could be wrong on that. I shouldn't until it's been 20 something years, but I think they were supposed to be here. But it also was for modesty and privacy. And I told you guys it allows wind to go through it, but you can't see through it.
Mm-hmm. He designed it so that the air would flow through it. That's right. But we're not going to replace it. It's too expensive. That's redwood.
Redwood.
It'd be $100,000 fence. And it's just
one day. One day.
So then in 1971, the administration under David Durr decided to fire 104 tenured faculty members, and they were fired. And actually, if you do speak to Lions, I think Emil Spies is.
Oh, okay.
He was one of the ones that was fired.
Oh my.
Yeah. And back to so, and some of the people that were fired were Bucky's people. Well, and there was also one board of trustee member that Bucky didn't like, but he or she didn't like him. So Bucky decided to leave SIU, and it was kind of good because if they ever did an audit on him, he'd be in trouble because he stole from Paul to pay Peter. They were all mixed up all the time, and that was just his view of how to use money. I think he went to Edwardsville first, and then ended up back in Philadelphia.
Yeah, him and Don Moore put together a plan for the modern university, and they put that.
That's right.
Over at Edwardsville.
That's right. And Brendan was the first chancellor, right?
I think, yeah.
Yeah.
No, I still had heard that like part of the 5 days in May were also part of the cause for Bucky's to. So there was some tension there when they moved up. They thought Delight Morris wasn't being firm enough. They moved him out, and once Delight was his, let him do what he wanted to do. That's why he would have been audited because Delight was like, just do what you got to do, Bucky. But that after Delight was moved out, that's when the others came in and sort of said, but it had to do with that 5 days in May.
Oh, okay.
And I don't know if you know. Do you know the story about Ed Applewhite?
I know the name.
Okay, Ed Applewhite was writing at the time Bucky was here. Helping him write Synergetics. He's the editor of Synergetics. Helped co-wrote it. Now, a lot of people don't know this, and there's this long story as to whether Bucky had someone in the CIA or the CIA had someone in Bucky's life. Mm-hmm. At age 15, Ed Applewhite was a family friend and had met Bucky at a wedding or something like that, the story goes. So Ed Applewhite was too young to be in the CIA, But Ed Applewhite was in the CIA, but he was Bucky's like main man. He was Bucky's helping him write the synergetics. Well, they thought it was very interesting that SIU got a Vietnamese studies program here. And this is the truth. Ed Applewhite was Robert McNamara's liaison with the CIA. A lot of people do not know this. I was at Ed Applewhite's funeral, and he was McNamara's liaison for the CIA, and they say he was coming here to be with Bucky. Then he was also going to the Vietnamese studies thing, and there was a lot of weirdness. People were like, "What's going on here?
Yeah.
Why is this guy seeing Bucky, but then also going to the Vietnamese study thing?" And there's no doubt Ed Applewhite was a CIA member. I was at his funeral. It was a little bit weird. And in this guy's house, very nice apartment in I want to say K Street in Washington. Every wall was covered with filing cabinets. Every single wall in the whole apartment. And you'd open them, and it'd be files, and he had things cut out of things, and he had typed on almost every single thing that was in there. He had typed notes. I just thought to myself, where did this man have the time?
Wow.
And the family said, if you see something you're interested in, put your name on it, and we'll go through it. And sure enough, they sent me a couple of his files. Mm-hmm. But so Ed Applewhite was a CIA guy, and people wondered, did Bucky have somebody in the CIA, or did the CIA have somebody watching Bucky?
Wow.
That's pretty high level to be the liaison for McNamara.
Well, Bucky did work for the Department of Defense during the Second World War, and one of his assignments was to figure out a way to defeat the Nazis. And Bucky said, "Fly over the North Pole and bomb, they'll never expect it," because everyone was thinking flat Earth kind of thinking. And according to cited in his book, Buckminster Fuller's Universe, he argues that German generals later in their Weimar magazine about fighting and whatever said that Bucky's plan would have worked. So that's kind of crazy. Just drop off for a second. There was a gentleman named Bill Perk, and in, I want to say 1958, he had the opportunity to hear Bucky speak at UCLA, and it was one of those elongated discussions. And Bill's wife,
girlfriend at the time, like this, I think Bill said like the second or third date. So it was pretty. He was pushing his luck.
And she was from Costa Rica. So Bill had heard Bucky, liked Bucky, and Bill worked for the I've heard the Rand Corporation, and I saw another that he worked for Lockheed.
I think he worked for both.
Okay.
Yeah.
And one of his jobs was a systems analysis. And one of the jobs he did was he compared the Polaris missiles shot out of the Nautilus sub to the Air Force's ICBMs in the silos around the country. And Bill came to the conclusion in his thinking and evaluation that the best nuclear bang for your buck was the sub in the Polaris missile. But it's big lobbyists in Washington, and now we have 50-year-old silos around the country that we hope we don't have to use against the Russians. I don't know. But Bill got tired of doing weaponry and called up Bucky and said, "Can you get me a job here?" And Bucky hired him. And behind Bill's name is literally a paragraph of abbreviations, including World War II vet. So I had Bill, and my first graduate degree was in environmental design, and I had Bill for a class, and that was in the 1980s, early 80s, and the text for the class was Scientific American, and it was a big, thick volume about how computers are going to affect everything, and they went point by point by point, medicine, transportation, thinking, education, what have you. And that was the text that we used. And at that time, Bill was arguing for setting blimps at a certain height around the world, and then letting them be and connecting the entire world by communication from the blimps themselves. And in Bill's class, there were four of us in there, 4 students. And we were sitting at a table about that wide, across from Bill. And one of the boys would just put his head down and go to sleep. Because Bill would just talk for 4 straight hours without stopping, just like Bucky. I'm just taking a step back here. Bill then at that time, he became the head of the design department. And what I didn't know, I didn't know I was getting comprehensive anticipatory design science. I had a class on systems. The other people that were there were Jack Elner, who was a biologist and an engineer, and he had these 10 subsystems that any system has. Did you ever see that?
I think I have seen that.
And then I had that was Jack Elmer. Then I had Alan Schoen, violin player, mathematician. If you go to SIU and hanging in the lobby of the rotunda of the new addition to the library is this free-form mathematical model that Al put together. See, who else do we have? They had, in the design department, they had Bill. They had Tom Cashel, who I had for urban design, and he was the best design teacher I ever had. I think he left because he was gay and somebody was giving him shit about it. Then there was David Clark. David Clark became my mentor, but with David, if you didn't argue back at him, he would just think you're a worm. And so, in the class I had with David, he had degrees in philosophy and architecture. There was a young girl graduating in the design department at undergrad, and she never had any history classes. So what David did, he got all the graduate students together. There were about 5 of us, and we had a lot of travel with a lot of slides behind us. And so we're going to meet in the little blue barracks, and we're going to just go through the history, and we're going to read Grafton's Traces on the Rhodian Shore, which is a 700-page book about the history of design. And they call it Traces on the Rhodian Shore because Aristophanes was at a shipwreck. They got cast on this island. They thought they were on some desolate island, nobody there. But then they saw geometric figures carved in the sand. They go, let us be of good hope. Somebody's here also. So we read that book and talk about it. And then David said, when you come to class, bring wine and bring cheese. Well, the kids brought in, cheap wine and craft cheese, and I brought in Camembert with a nice bottle of wine. So and we'd lock the door, and we would just sit and drink and show pictures and stuff. It was a good class.
Yeah.
But anyway, the night later, I wrote my thesis, and Dave was the chair. But that's another story. So Bill's here, and Bucky leaves. 61 sells us to Mike Mitchell.
Yeah.
And Mike then rents it out to students. And so by the time we got it in 1999, the kids had cats in here. The cats peed on the cork and whatever. The cork upstairs is original. This is brand spanking new from Portugal. This hexagon was actually kicked in. Somebody tried to repair it. Yeah. They were off 2 inches.
For repair, yeah.
And there was a 6x6 post right in that corner to the center of that to hold it up. And there's a picture of you that I showed in my presentation, Bucky at school. This is all rotted out. And I think you're with Bill, and you guys are pointing out the rotted. And when Bucky first finished the building, he used some kind of tape on the seams that didn't work. It leaked like a sieve. So by the time we got it, it had 3 layers of shingles on it. And there's probably enough THC in the deck that if you burnt it, you would get high.
Yeah, they're growing weed in here.
And then, I kind of jumping over, I apologize. Bucky's Dome is a book that Thad Heckman, the architect of this project, and Carrie Odell, a writer, they interviewed everybody who lived here. And that book is all about their experiences, including the ghosts of Anne and Bucky right after they died out here by the fountain. I don't know. So the bill sat on it for about till 2002. I think it's when they started the RBF Dome NFP, a not-for-profit organization. And you were the first president.
Yeah.
Okay. Followed by Brent Ritzel. And now I've now got you on the hot spot. I was told that you actually wrote the grant. Brent just submitted it.
I did it. Yeah.
That's okay. I did not. I heard that lately, and I wanted. So there was when Obama came out as president, he was trying to get economic stimulus to happen. So with the National Park Service, they created a grant called Save America's Treasures. Corey wrote this grant. Brent submitted it. And then when I took over, we hadn't spent any money on the building yet, and that was 10 years ago. And my attitude was stick our neck out. We've got the money. This buy it.
Well, it was probably hard because one of them still was you had to generate, like, they would give you money, but you had to have some of your own. They just wanted to give you money, so we still needed some raise of money to get it moving. But I think Bill probably put some money in.
Yeah, Bill invested in Apple stock. It was $5 a share. So a lot of this restoration has come from Bill, money-wise. Not to say there are other people like. Del Ritzel, we think he's probably given now about $20,000.
I mean, I probably got 20,000 in it.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. When I was here, we had to be very, very, very cautious. I don't know if the institutional memory is still here, but one of the first things we were told when we got the 501c3, I think, Jan Payne, her husband owns the Quattros. She's an accountant, and she said, "Well, one of the things you guys got to be very cautious of is the IRS is concerned that people like Bill turn their hobbies into not-for-profits, and you absolutely have to make sure that Bill is at arm's length of all the decisions. It cannot look like you guys are just doing Bill Perk's bidding." So it became a kind of a big thing. And the fact that Bill was putting all the money in was starting to become like, it's starting to look like it's still Bill's hobby. But I literally went up to Chicago to make money just so I could put money into it, so it didn't look like he was the only person putting money in. There was no other money coming. I'm like, this looks like we could lose our 501c3, and as the president who signed the documents, I could go to jail if I was letting a hobbyist become a not-for-profit. So I made sure I made money. I made sure I put money in. I tried to keep Bill at arm's length, which you can imagine how hard that was. Mm-hmm. But it became a weird thing where we're just kind of almost butting heads a little bit because, like, Bill, you can't be doing. He was making promises to people to do stuff, and then we voted on it later to pay him, and I was like, that can't be done. So I put a lot of money in just I believe in it for one. And this is a way to leverage the community to share the idea. Like, you can have a thing, but to have an actual place, people can come and you can use it as a megaphone almost. Mm-hmm. That's what I said.
So my hopes are that in Plano, Illinois, there's the Farnsworth House. It's an all-glass house designed by Mies van der Rohe for Dr. Miss Farnsworth. There's a new book out called The Glass House, and he even had a relationship with her. But it's built on the Fox River. It floods every now and then. But what they did is that you have to walk about a quarter mile to get to the building itself. They built a classy-looking metal building, which is their visitor center. You go there, then you walk from there to the site. And this is where my concern is right now about our organization, is that in architecture we use the term place and occasion. Well, we're going to have two places, the Dome and the visitor center, but we need to have more occasions occurring here. Mm-hmm. And Edwardsville has Ben, and he has everybody coming in there to speak and do strange things, what have you. So we're hoping it's going to happen here along the way. So anyway, just a funny story. I ran trips to Cuba for a while, and I was in Trinidad. I had gone out snorkeling and come back in, and I was at the bar having a mojito and enjoying it. And there were a bunch of us there, and we were talking about SIU and Carbondale. And there was a young man with his wife over here, and he turns over and goes, "Are you guys from Carbondale?" I said, "Yeah, I teach there." He goes, "Oh, wow." He goes, "Maybe you know my father." And I go, "Well, who's your dad?" He goes, "Bill Perk." And his son, this was Jeff.
Probably Jeff, yeah.
Yeah, he's a travel writer.
Yeah.
So it was like meeting Bill Perk's kid on an island.
But these are the magic things that happen with Bill Perk. I got that story that I told at the little thing. It's like magic happened around that guy. Yeah. It just magic happened around that guy. yeah, some. I'm getting goosebumps now. The guy was.
What questions can we?
Yeah, we're blather.
Before we go back to Bucky, I'm curious to know more about Bill Perk. Obviously, like now that you mentioned me, obviously just by having invested in Apple at $5, and then how he came back with doing everything he did with it, because without him, none of it would have existed.
Totally.
He would have gone away, and you would have gotten interested. You probably would have been doing something else. Maybe we would not be here today.
Oh, he's a catalyst. He called himself a catalyst, scout, conscience, and there's one more I can't think. He was the catalyst, a scout, conscience, and I'll find it. It's somewhere written, but he was a catalyst. If he could find a way to make something happen, he had this thing of going, and we'll do it. Let's get it done, And he was a scout, always looking for new ideas, and he had a conscience. He kept us on that path of Bucky. Keep on that path of Bucky. Don't get distracted. And I'll think of the other one. But yeah, Bill Perk was a monumental part of the community for keeping Bucky alive. So I think eventually this would have been torn down. It would have fallen down if Bill Perk didn't step up and buy it. And again, his kids, who were great kids. I went to a trip to Italy with Bill Perk and his kids. I guess Bill didn't want to, at his age, he didn't want to fly at all. Flying, if I was going to go, I'll go with you, Bill. I'll help you get around, and we'll find our way. But he got great kids, but he essentially spent every dime of their inheritance. They did well themselves, but at the same, Bill Perk put his money where his mouth is, and he bought this place. And we would travel to go talk ideas of the disintegration group taken off. They started doing a lot of work in Europe, and Bill and I would be the Bucky guys, because Bucky had a function in this integration idea. So it was good to have some people who understood Bucky's ideas. So we went and helped the integration people get their ideas, and Bill would fund that stuff. But yeah, Bill was the foundation of this.
And Thad, the architect of the project, we had urban design classes together in the design department, and so did. Come on, John. Karen Midden.
Oh yeah.
And Karen did her thesis in environmental design on Bucky's World Games. And actually there's a pavilion at Turley Park, small park over
Sure.
here.
Yeah.
Yes.
And she actually painted the World Games. They did the World Games there. Let's see what else. But anyway, and then there's another architect, Bob Swinson. He went to the design department, and then he went to Yale. But all three of us think differently than other trained architects. It's a different way of solving problems. And I didn't know that. That's what I was getting at all. My background is my architecture studies is a put together degree. I was able to call it architecture studies, and it satisfied licensure for me. But anyway, back to, and Karen put a green roof on the ag building and a green wall growing inside the ag building. Thad, when he graduated from design, realized that he did not have an architecture degree. And for the first couple of years, I believe that he's a Kentucky boy. He worked at a junkyard crushing cars. And his joke was, I've crushed more expensive cars than you'll ever own. But then he worked his way up, and now he's designing the transportation building downtown now. It's a single person firm, And he's restoring, he has 3 pieces of cord cars, and he's restoring the cord right now.
Wow.
And cords, Duesenberg owned them, and they're the ones with out of the bonnet or the hood that they have those flexible.
The hidden headlights, and they had the tubes coming out of them.
Yeah.
And they had supercharger, which was for the time was like, who thought of putting a supercharger on cars back? But they had a straight 8 with a supercharger on it back in the 30s.
Mm.
Yeah.
Then Bill Perk, he wore the same clothes all the time. It's called a Cubana shirt, the long shirts, there's pockets here and pockets here and pockets
Called a Guyana, or called a. Yeah, it's the shirts wearing in Cuba. They got this design on them here with the pockets, and
And his pocket would all be stuffed full of pens and things. You know,
He was he had pens and anything you needed. He had a ruler in there. He had, and in his pocket, he had things hanging from him. He had to have scissors. And he was ready to go at any time. He was the Boy Scout of Boy Scouts. That if you needed something, you just ask Perk, oh, I got one of those right here. You know, and he'd pull it out. Yellow, orange, blue, green pens for everything. Yeah. He was a character.
yeah. And his wife was beautiful. He came in one time, a number of years ago, and had a picture and wanted me to scan it in so we could have a digital form of it. She was from Costa Rica.
Yeah. And Ruth was. I didn't meet Ruth. I think I got a whole Perk a couple years after she had just passed, and he was still pretty sad. But we hit it off, and we started to attack the world. We're gonna spread Bucky's ideas, no matter what it took. Yeah.
I know that Sam Goldman said the eulogy or helped out with Bill when she died. She died of cancer, and Sam Goldman was chancellor at one time, but he was also the local rabbi for Jacob something synagogue in town here. Anyway.
Yeah, so there's those interesting dynamics where we've got Bucky all doing that big stuff. But there's still a local community that he affected in an amazing way. He changed the community. There's the seeds of Bucky are everywhere, and then you never know where you're at somewhere, and then someone's like start to hear and talk about Bucky and change the way people think, and that's kind of that thing, is to get people to think differently, just to realize that you can make the world a better place for all people, that you can think differently. And there's circle gardens around, in this town because of, that's an efficient way of getting spheres or circles next to each other, and it's a very efficient way of gardening. And there's just all these little things that I love community for, because it's got all these little tiny Bucky-isms, throughout the whole community. And then someone will have a dome house here, and someone will have a dome house there, and it's got this feeling to it that Bucky's here. Bucky was here. He left his mark here.
In the design department in its heyday, we had 5 domes on campus. There was one at Campus Lake, the other one, which is Bucky's Haven at Campus Lake, and there were 4 domes across the street from the communication building and some old Army barracks, and that was the design department.
Bigger than this or same size? Same size as this?
Well, these are a little bit small. They're like pavilions where people put there's a little covering so people could have picnics and stuff like that. But there was another one just like this, I think the same size. The Synergy Dome was in town. That now that there's a dome that used to be over this, where I told you we came and put this over here. They took it apart and put it over there. But so there was a second dome in town, and this was like a dome town.
Yeah, we had that bigger aluminum dome over this dome to protect it, and the joke was called the condom. So
we had a piece of we had a custom built or bought piece of plastic that we put together in some. I think we went around somebody's large warehouse and glued them together so it was wide enough. And then literally one day we climbed on the outside, pulled this huge. It looked like we were putting a condom on a big piece of plastic, and then we strapped it all down so it would weatherproof it, because it was you could see outside from inside here. So we needed to do something until you could raise the money. If you didn't have the money, it would just rot. So we had Blair Wolfram come down, and Bill again, I think, bought the dome from a metal dome from him. And Blair came down and we put it up. I got a bunch of pictures of us putting it up.
But when we put it up, I put it up over the old dome and behind the Gaia House, which is our spirituality center. And it was mostly, I teach a class on expressions in architecture, which is a core curriculum class for all majors. But that time, I had the majority of the students were automotive students. We worked on 3 levels of scaffolding. It's getting dark. No one signed off on any kind of insurance or any kind of. I'm just going, oh God, don't let them fall. But we got it out safely.
Yeah. But luckily we had this. We were actually standing on the roof mainly to put this one up, because you could reach out just far enough to kind of bolt. Someone hanging on here by your belt. But we got it up. But I was telling these guys, like, the one interesting thing was it's like fluid until you put those last pieces in, and then it kind of like gets rigid. It was really a dynamic, it's weird to see. I mean, it was so fluid. You almost had to like prop it up. It was just so fluid, but then it would rock up.
In the summertime, I teach camps for grade school kids, middle school kids, and high school kids about architecture. And and I wanted them to build a dome. So we do the little toothpick things with plastic, and they can build a big dome or small little dome. But I wanted to build a decent sized one. So I had a friend that was a sheriff in the next door county, and I asked if I could have some Schedule 40 8-inch PVC pipe. And he gave me as much as I wanted. So those are going to be the hubs. So at home out in the country, I'm sitting there with a circular saw. It's the stupidest thing in the world. I mean, I was looking for danger and trouble. And I got those cut, then I drilled holes in them. And then I got 1.5 inch PVC pipe. I drilled holes in those two. So you would actually put the pipe into the connector, put a piece of wire and wire them together. And then it's kind of rickety looking, but it was like about a 9-foot tall dome. Well, I had been invited to make presentations at the Smithsonian Museum in Washington, D.C., and we had all gone over to the National Building Institute, and they saw the dome, and they wanted it, so I gave it to them. So, no big dome anymore for the kids.
Yeah, but just seeing dome, it makes you think differently. I mean, if you haven't seen one, the first time you see one, you're like, what the heck is that? But, yeah, it's just it's the way nature builds stuff. If nature needed to find a way to enclose space, this is how it would do it.
Is what you were saying earlier, that just coming in here, you feel different. Ideas just flow more and just feel open, which is doesn't quite describe the feeling.
But I'm going to say, hang on to that idea. That's that thing that Bucky was trying to say we can't do yet. You've never been inside one, so you don't have a word to describe how you feel inside one. We have to make up words to describe it. I don't know what to call it either. I kind of call it comforting. It's because it kind of mellows you up, but I don't know what the word is because we've never been in one before. And these are those things that Bucky was saying, that if new things you don't know, we don't have words to describe what it feels like to be in here. It feels natural. I get goosebumps. I just feel like I'm supposed to be in here. I don't know how to, but what do you call that? We don't have words. We truly don't have words. We have to come up with words.
A couple of years ago, I was teaching and working in Cape Breton University in Sydney, Nova Scotia. And on the way there, Barb and I stopped at Montreal because we wanted to visit the Expo 67 Dome. Have you been in that one, Dome?
No, I'm planning to go.
It's like walking into a grand cathedral.
Yeah.
It's just amazing, It did have plastic coverings on the outside. Some welder wasn't much what he was doing. It caught fire, so it got a bad name. And Bucky also wanted his geoscope inside, which was projecting of different activities. So this is 1967, around the world at one time. But now we can do that, with I was thinking about that with the SoFi Stadium, where last year's Super Bowl, but that whole stadium was basically a television, a screen. I could see that happening again today with Bucky, but the U.S. government didn't want that. They just let him build the dome,
So the concept of the geosphere is that because of mathematical and astronomical distances, that if you put a dome on the surface of the Earth, but you make it clear and you get inside the dome so you can see out of it, like you can draw the Earth on it. And then if you look up and you look through your hometown in India and you see the star that's pointing straight over yours, you can call your home and say, look straight up and see if you see the star. And they'll see the star. Because it's like a model of the Earth next to the Earth. And so you could see, as long as you have the Earth put on it, properly oriented, that you can look up and go, that's what it looks like above your hometown. That's what the stars look like from where you're living. And that was his idea, to get other people to think about where you live. I live on Earth. I live in the universe. This is a different way of looking at the world. And it was another way of sort of doing this model. He said you could do it with, like I said, television and LCD screens. It's like playing the World Game. Did we talk about World Game yet?
The map, or
it's like taking the map and then saying, okay, if you take 100% of humanity, you could break it down into 1%. So you could take 100 people, put them on the world map, and then go put people where they're supposed to be. So you put 10 people, in in China or whatever the mathematic was of how many percentage of the people there stand in China, and you go, wow, look at how tight it is. And there's other places with hardly any people. Then you had to start talking about resources. Well, these resources are over here. Well, how do we get those resources shipped over there? How do we share them? You know, is there a smart way to do it? And so we call it World Game, is to look at 100% of humanity and how they interact, where they're at, and how do we share resources. And they did that all over the planet. There was a lot of World Games done. Alan Schlossberg, he was a student here. Schlossberg, he ended up marrying John F. Kennedy's daughter, Caroline Kennedy.
Oh, okay.
Ed Schlossberg. That's right, Ed Schlossberg, and he took it on. He was only pretty much after Bucky took on World Game. Yeah, he's still around. We should.
The first criteria in World Games was everybody has electricity. And Bucky started something else called GENI, Global Energy Network Initiative. And you can find this online. I mean, the entire world is on the same grid.
Interesting.
And so if there's hydroelectric being produced over here and it can be shared, you know, or if there's nuclear over here, it can be shared, or if there's wind turbines over here, they can be shared. So everybody has electricity around the world. I mean, we can't even get that done in the United States. Texas is on their own grid.
Yeah, Texas is on their own separate grid because they don't want to be part of it, you know. But I was in a BFI space camp. Have you heard of the space camps they do? Okay, I was just in a BFI space camp, I don't know, 2 months ago.
Yes, I have.
And that GENI guy was in there. He's done. He's like 40 years he's been doing it. And his name sounds like something else, but it's he would like someone to take over GENI.
Wow.
He's looking for someone to take it. We'll give you everything. I just need someone to take it over. I can't 40 years of this. And you know, he says sometimes you're sad and you're like 40 years and we still don't have a energy grid. How are we gonna have electric cars if you don't have energy everywhere? Mm-hmm. And the energy that's able to energize cars, because you need overnight, going to be lots of charging being done. And you know, if we're going to move to an electric system like that, we've got to change our infrastructure. We absolutely have to. And without it being, again, the way to be able to attack that is to do it efficiently, which means you've got to look globally. You cannot say, well, we really don't like those Russians. Let's not work with them. And while the Chinese, sometimes they're pains. Let not work. No, you got to go, no. This has to work the same. Has to have the same kind of voltage. Has to have the same anticipatory, like what requirements for cleanliness of the electricity. You guys don't know about clean, like the super high energy that's used in factories has to be a certain, like they call it clean. Not a clean. It's called a purity, like an energy purity. Like when they go to do those arcs in steel plants, like it has to be a certain kind of energy. It can't just be, well, we made it from solar power. It needs to be this, whatever these statistics are, whatever these measurements are, that has to be this really good, pure energy. And there's a name for it, but you have to decide that and have it everywhere. Otherwise, it just isn't going to go over. You can't have one kind of energy here, one kind of energy there, and the same kind of car trying to plug in. Like even right now, we got Porsches are 800 volts, and I think Teslas are 5 or 600 something volts, and then there's some cars are doing it only at 280 volts, and I think my pickup truck's got one that's 48 volts. We got to come up with a plan, and it's got to be globally.
One of Bucky's opportunities, that same commander who he worked under for the rescue boats, got Bucky into a short-term Naval Academy, Annapolis, for officer training. And what Bucky learned at that time is that he learned comprehensive problem solving, because at that time you didn't have, at the beginning you did not have ship-to-shore communication. You didn't have the internet, you didn't have a telephone, and if you're out in the middle of the sea and something breaks down, you've got to fix it yourself out there. And when in Manual for Spaceship Earth, he talks about how sailors had a better view of dealing with the world than did people who were land lovers, and even pirates too. What was going to? There was another person that Bucky helped bring in to SIU. It was Catherine Dunn. She was African American woman married to a white guy in the early 30s, and she was interested in dance. And so and you can read her thesis from the University of Chicago online. And so what she did, she realized that when Africans were captured, brought to the Caribbean, confined into slavery, that the Europeans took away their dance and their drums. And she wanted to go back and find out what the dance was that they had. And but everybody was a colony. I mean, all the islands were colonies there, so except one. In 1744, the Maroons, those are escaped slaves, kicked the French out of Haiti. And then they reverted back to their original beliefs, which was voodoo, which is still alive and well today in Haiti. I worked in Haiti on a project, and it's alive. But so she went there to study the dance and became a voodoo princess. And but you can look online. Excuse me. She the Jefferson Memorial, the Missouri Historical Building. They had an exhibition of her work about 10 years ago, all the costumes and the dances and everything. But she taught here at SIU, and she was part of that think tank with Bucky about thinking differently. And
it was Catherine that asked him to look at solutions for East St. Louis. I don't know if she was from East St. Louis or something. I think she might have been from there as a.
Bill and I were at her house one evening.
Yeah,
She's too sick to come down.
Yeah, I was there. Were you there for the disintegration for the Old Man River City disintegration?
No.
Must have been a different night, because I was at her house too. Same thing. She was too sick to come down, but we all went there after this one of the nights after disintegration for the Old Man River City project. But I think Catherine asked Bucky, Bucky, when I live in East St. Louis, it is a tough. It's run down. What can we do? And then Bucky developed that round sort of city structure that we talked about. That now looks like it's Apple's new headquarters. But that was for Catherine Dunn asking to come up with a plan for East St. Louis.
So, but I haven't found out yet, and I'm going to talk to Jamie or Alexander about it, is that Allegra started a dance, and the ethnicity of dance, I'm saying it wrong, at UCLA. So I'm just wondering if she came across Catherine, was influenced by Catherine.
Could be. There was so many connections.
But then that commander that liked Bucky, when Bucky came out, Bucky got on a ship with that commander, which was the first U.S. Navy ship that had ship-to-shore communication.
The Marconi radio, yeah.
And then put that together with, in 1965, Bucky had a conference here called Vision 65. And the keynote speaker was Marshall McLuhan, who wrote The Media is the Message. Which I think is kind of interesting. And the theme of the conference was looking at new technologies and how they're going to affect communication. And then I just started out, I gave a lecture in classes including Bucky's class, on Paul Revere Williams, African-American architect. And I wanted to know what Bucky said about racism. And he made the statement that racism is old tribalism and a lack and an ineffective communication. I'm paraphrasing it, but it was kind of an interesting statement. It wasn't like love your neighbor kind of thing. It was kind of something very, very different to think about.
Well, he also talked about how, if you look at where different skin tones and even the change of hair, it's around the equator, because you need something to block the sunlight coming in. Like you needed a natural sunblock, and the hair is helps to get the water, the sweat, to run off without hanging on to you because it was just too much. He said they're just natural adaptations. There's only 4 blood types on this planet. We must be related. Let's not pretend the brain works the way the brain works. Let's not. All it is he said it was an adaptation to the Earth's. Like there's so much more sunlight, you had to be prepared for it. There was nothing about anything different than just being prepared to deal with what the Earth was offering, and it's just an adaptation.
Another book I'd recommend is American Pioneers, and it's all about Bucky's transcendentalism. You want to look at his philosophical side.
Right. So is this philosophy what drew him to Buddhism? Or how did he get started, or how did he first come across?
I don't know, was he a Buddhist?
Like, I see a lot of artifacts here which are like related to Buddhism, so I'm curious if you were like following the teachings or like.
I'm trying to think.
Well, I told you why I got into Buddhism, and that was, I think if you believe you're coming back here, you'll treat the Earth differently. And I could see, well, I could be wrong, but I could see him saying, if someone saying that, because he's a thinker, and if someone said, "Wait a minute, if you're coming back here, you wouldn't treat it like a rental car. Maybe it's not a bad idea to start thinking about what if you're coming back here." But there is a story of him having an outer body experience that was, he felt like he was floating, and it might have happened around the day he had that. Said it happened in Chicago.
Mm-hmm.
It might have been on the way back from Burnham Harbor that he had this outer body. He felt like he was floating above the ground. And that's when that universe more of that universe sort of telling him that you don't belong to you, you belong to the universe, and you can think this through, sort of wipe clear those other ways of thinking and follow your intuition. Because that's what he named his boat Intuition, because he believed a lot about your intuition. Trust your gut. Trust when you think something doesn't make sense. Don't kick yourself because everyone else says, "No, you should do it this way." He's like, trust your intuition.
Here's a big drinker. Noguchi said that Bucky could drink him under the table. And then Bucky realized that people are not going to listen to him if they think he's an alcoholic, so he just quit.
Yeah.
And then what I did, he drank tea all the time. So I bought teapot in here, and I got tea in there, I got honey in there, and hopefully and dishes for tea. I hope someday I get around to it and have friends over and invitation, and I can offer you tea.
That might be a little something that we could think about. Yours aren't that far away. You guys could have a once a month. We come down here and we have some tea or some wine and cheese and just chat. The Fuller Dome chat sessions or something, where we just invite smart people, intelligent people, or open-minded people to just come and sit in here and have a chat. And some of the best times I've ever had were just meeting at Don Moore's Dome with some bright people, having a good meal, having a drink or two, and just chatting. Because unless you're taught, how do you get these ideas? Because I'll tell you, it's an interesting thing about the way the brain works. Okay, if it's just in your head, truly isn't real yet. It's not until it leaves your body, gets into this physical realm, and either comes back to you as something reflected on paper into your eye, or in a physical vibration that is picked up by your eardrum. Until if it's just in here, it's almost not real. There's an analog digital divide in us. Our brain works digital, on-off neurons, but we live in a physical world that's analog. And it's not until it comes out of you and it gets reflected back in that it almost becomes real. So it's good to talk about ideas. Sometimes you just got to say them out loud and chat. So then you can also go, "Wow, that's the dumbest thing I've ever said," because I've done that at times. Because sometimes you just got to hear it and you go, "Oh, that didn't sounded a lot better in my head." But yeah, I could see us getting together and just having some chats, and just picking a topic and chewing some fat, and let's just talk about ideas.
I belong to an organization called the Academy for Neuroscience for Architecture, and every other year, architects and neuroscientists, we meet at the Salk Institute in California and just talk and make presentations. And one of the most interesting gentlemen was Rusty Gage, and you can go online and you can see this lecture. Rusty is a neuroscientist, and he argues that yes, architecture can modify you psychologically, but it can also modify you physiologically. And he studied the orphan kids during the war in Yugoslavia and Czechoslovakia, and how their DNA has changed because of the horrible environments that they're in. And he called epigenetics is the term he uses. So the things you're talking about, I think Bucky was onto something, looking for that ultimate structure of the universe. And I think his transcendentalism drove him in that direction.
But he saw it in a big way. He talks, and I want to say it's critical past. There's a lot of that he was sort of saying that if you want people to adapt and to be better people, improve their world and they'll adapt accordingly. Like make it a more efficient world, give them better housing. Let's find ways to, it wasn't give. It was if you create this world where people are better, they'll adapt to be better people. So he was even thinking on that level, like if we could just make the world a little bit better, every time we make them better, the people will become better. Mm. He's thinking about these things. That's when we keep going back, and we kind of got started on. Someone presented a question of like, how come Fuller's ideas didn't work, and is he smart? Would his ideas have been better as Elon Musk's or something? And I still go back to saying Fuller was doing something much more grand, and that he was literally thinking about trying to evolve people to be better human beings by making their world a better place. And you can do it by using nature's way of building things and housing space and creating structure. That's how nature creates structure. This is a virus. This is a virus shell. It's safe and stable in here. It's almost like naturally you can feel it. You feel safe and stable in here. I can tell that roof's never coming. It's not going to ever collapse on me. You can just feel it. The structure is in that surface. It's not in this beam holding everything up. And you wonder sometimes, do people subconsciously feel unsafe in a gravity-based rectilinear structure? I always feel safe, comfortable, and secure in a dome.
Upstairs, there's a 1941 March issue of Life magazine. These are the big coffee table books, looking Life for the two magazines. And it's about Bucky. And inside that is a cardstock that you could fold into it's a Dymaxion Map that you could fold into a Dymaxion globe itself. That's March 1941. We haven't even entered the war yet, which I thought was pretty crazy. I was given a paper in Singapore, 2019, I think, and maybe 2018, and I'm looking through the program, and there's a professor from Poland giving a lecture on Fuller. So I tracked him down, and he goes, John, you must come to Work Hall, Poland, because we're having Bucky at Work Hall in some week in September. I go, fine. So it was an open invitation to be give a paper there. So Barb and I went there. We got to Work Hall. We were at the end of the tourist season, so we would book a tour, and we were the only person on the tour. We book a boat tour. We were the only person on a huge boat, and then finally, next day came, and I needed to go give the paper because Jamie was going to be there, the grandson, and that was the time that Ben Lauder at Edwardsville Dome was negotiating with Jamie and Alexandra for 3,500 of Bucky's books and artifacts. And I knew that we needed to make a presence there, and I can meet Jamie. So Barb and I woke up in the morning, I go down to a taxi, I say, can you take me to this address? And he looks at me and goes, son, you're in Work Hall. That's in Krakow. I go, oh God. I go, what's it going to cost me to go there as fast as you can? He goes, $400. And I go, fine, let's do it. We drove over 100 miles an hour, got there, met Jamie, gave my presentation, I made eye contact with him. I don't know if that helped at all, get the acquisition or not. But then Ben, when they finally said yes, Ben drove a U-Haul truck from Edwardsville to California twice. And one time through all the smoke, with all the burning fires that were going on there. Wow. And we brought the 3,500 books back. SIU has it now. We have a memo of understanding. They are cataloging them. We'll get about 500 back over here to upstairs. But Anne's desk came along, and the Foo Dogs came along too, and we always thought they were black because that was the only picture we had in black and white painting. So when we uncrated them, it was like being at King Tut's 2 uncrating something, And in reality, they're not Foo Dogs, they're Foo Lions. We call them Foo Dogs. And one is male and one is female, and the female always has her paw on top of the world as a maternal responsibility. And supposedly, if you look at the mouths of the two dogs, and really classy ones, both their mouths are designed in such a way that they produce the perfect sound of the universe. I don't know. The Foo Dogs.
Yeah. No, it's beautiful. It's like, you're doing a great job.
There's so many like little hidden meanings behind everything that you see here. It's fascinating. Like if you like this nitpick every little thing, you will find a story behind it, and it's fascinating.
Well, another thing, and again, some of this stuff, he didn't write about, so you had to hear from people. But if I'm not mistaken, this is like one of the only houses he ever owned. He was an apartment guy. He lived in a lot of apartments because he was traveling a lot. But this is one of the few houses they ever owned.
I'm curious, why did he not make a Dymaxion House for himself?
He was offered a bunch of change one time to build homes. And he had a very negative view of the greed of manufacturers. And I mean, he walked away from it.
Yeah. As I said, he would, like, he could sense that you're not going to build this to my standards of integrity. And essentially you could make a bad name for me if these things are turning out to be crap because you're trying to initially, cut the cost right away by making that central pole thinner, lighter, and so he could tell when he was about to get scammed, and he was like, I'd rather not do this. That doesn't feel right. But his whole thing was, trying to be efficient. So he noticed that we had people coming back from World War II, lots of them. We had lots of manufacturing facilities, lots of them. I mean, Ford City, Green, was right there in Chicago building aircraft. He had all these places you could build stuff. And he's like, well, build modern homes out of modern lightweight materials and set them up for people.
Right, because you also had the housing crisis at the same time.
And the housing crisis was a perfect idea, but for some reason, people just resisted and went with still the rectilinear craftsman house where the people came to your house and who knows what kind of craftsmanship you got. But his thing was, if you do it on an assembly line, you can tighten those tolerances. You can watch craftsmanship. You can have a feedback system in there, quality control, and someone would get a nice quality house out of it. But it just didn't happen.
What's happening I see right now is glamping is very, very popular, and glamping in domes. Barb and I were in Jordan a year ago, and we were out in the desert. And we were going to hang out with the Bedouins. So we were on the cheap end of that one. And so we didn't get, but the real fancy ones, they had domes in the desert. And the Jordanians called them bubbles, which I thought was kind of funny. But I know China is selling the glamping domes. I haven't priced them yet, but anyway.
Eventually it's going to have to take off. It is the most efficient way to build things. They're safer. Like I said, in an earthquake, this will not collapse. Yeah, your books are going to fall off its shelves, and your cabinets are going to open up, and your dishes are going to fall out, but the structure itself is not going to collapse on you, which is the most important thing, is it not? You just don't want your whole family to die in your house. The other part in earthquake zones is with the rectilinears, the shaking might have stopped, but everyone still sleeps out in the yard for a couple of weeks while the tremors continue to happen, aftershocks. Well, here, if you live in a dome, you can just stay right in your house. You pile up the dishes and what have you, but you can stay right in your house. And the same thing about hurricanes. The round shape actually hunkers it to the ground tighter as the wind blows past. So it's a safe thing to have for earthquake zones and hurricane zones. I don't know why we don't have them built everywhere. I don't understand. I just do not understand. But
do you think it's a problem of public perception, like just this design that might not be appealing to most people, or what do you think the problem might be as to why this never, we don't see it today?
Well, there's talk about look at this wall, the table's not up against it. But nowadays, what they normally do is they put a knee wall up about 4 feet. So you do have some flat, shape against the wall.
Can't hang your family's pictures.
Yeah, you can't hang your family's pictures on this wall. You have to hang them on the inner walls and
acoustic privacy you don't have.
Right. Yeah, couldn't believe today my stomach was growling, more Berigmi, and I'm like, you guys are probably all hearing it's probably ricocheting off the thing here. But you don't have any acoustic privacy. Although I wouldn't be surprised. Once again, though, with technology, you could find a way. There's probably a thin triangulation of a foam you could put in certain places to bend it, to stop the sounds. And there's way with technology you could come up with ways. And even with the noise canceling, you could have a speaker listening to the noise, and then have another speaker or a microphone listening, and a speaker coming out with something else to kind of quiet it. My truck's got noise canceling in it. You can do that with the modern technology. So there's ways to do it. But the other thing is too, like right now, a lot of people can come up and build a rectilinear structure for you. You tell someone to come work on your dome, they look at you like, oh man, I don't know how this works. I don't know that angle. What angle is that? And it's hard to find people who can work on them. It used to be only a couple of people in the whole country, I understand, knew how to put the shingles on. And they wanted a lot of money, and you had to get on their list because there's a certain way to kind of put the shingles on so you don't get the leaking and what have you. But there's a new way of putting tops on. They might take off, but I just keep thinking about, and again, partly it's here in America where we have our industry set. But countries that don't have, that just need housing for people, we could get into those areas and say, hey, folks, you could almost do this yourself. Get yourself a lathe and make round struts, buy these chairs, stamp out these cheap, hubs, because the reality of the structure is where the strength is. So the hub doesn't truly have to be that strong. Once it's bolted in, the whole thing shares the strength. So they can really be, that's where Bucky probably went wrong. He thought, yeah, I can use Venetian blind things because once it gets up, it'll all hold itself. And there's a sense to that, but it can't be that flimsy. It can't be as flimsy as a Venetian blind thing. Or he could have done it if the Venetian blind things were only about a foot, maybe a foot and a half. But you can't. He was having them like 8 foot long, wasn't he? And the thing is kind of. But for places that don't have enough housing right now, this would be the thing to walk in and say, "Here you go, folks. Do this." But if no one comes in there, guess what they do? They still have the guy in the quarry outside of town with his cart will bring bricks in that he's made, and then what do you do with bricks? You pile them on top of each other and they use gravity still. So until we can get these things brought to people in an efficient way and in a low cost, they're not going to absorb the best ideas. But here it is. This is the way nature does stuff.
Right, and I think that's the main issue with a lot of these ideas, that they were too innovative, and then we need to basically create a vertical integration to do anything. So for the house, for the car, or for anything, you needed to create obviously the manufacturing, because people didn't know how to manufacture these things, and then you would need to create like policies and things like that, and then everything you needed to create from the ground up all the way up, and that just takes too much effort. That it's not like that. Just didn't go with Bucky's nature of inventing and finding that fundamental structure of the universe. And I think that's something that you taught me, which is like Bucky wasn't trying to be this guy of creating things, and to get them. It was more like, here's a demonstration for years to come, and not necessarily make a lot of them and get them. But that in itself is another, it's another type of intelligence, of building this vertical integration and getting your ideas to be used by millions of people. But it's a different type of brilliance that Bucky had, and that's something that you've taught me, and I'm quite grateful that you make me see this different way.
Well, I think if you guys having the drive to want to learn new things, I'm going to tell you, people just want to sometimes take those ideas and leverage and make some money and make life happen. But to want to look at different ideas, that takes a lot of internal fortitude to say, I'm going to take a different path and I'm going to look for new ideas. Because it's the harder way. It is the harder way to go a different way. Bucky could have got a job. He was a smart guy. That guy could have got a job in a corporation. He would have been making tons of money. He would have lived the life in his own beautiful boat at a beach house. He gave all that up to try to make the world better for all of us.
And sometimes it's just that little step. I mean, for instance, like we invite a lot of people. Hey, we went to this thing. It's just like really cool. But I mean, it's like, okay, like, why? I mean, like, why would you wake up in the morning and drive 3 hours and come here? I mean, I don't know why. I mean, just to learn, right? Like why else?
No.
But it's so interesting, and I don't know why we stumble upon this, but we can only wait and see what happens.
Well, you introduced this conversation by what you guys are doing to go and visit and interviewing somebody and being in a different department, whatever. Bucky wanted to put a dome over the Carbondale campus, and I never understood that until I was instructed that he wanted to break down all of the brick and mortar. So I would go talk to the physics instructor, or I would go talk to the music people,
Right.
and have the openness. That, in one way, that kind of happened with me. I got really interested in neuroscience, and Greg Rose ran our neuroscience institute on campus, and so I met with Greg, and we would talk, and I had some research I wanted to do. But he was so nice to me every time I started to talk about the structure of the brain and my thoughts about it, that he never sat back and corrected me. No, that's in the wrong part of the brain. No, V1 to V6 is not located there. He never did that. He just let me talk and he listened to me, which I thought was exactly what you were going after. So, but he retired.
That's another thing we all do. So that life's.
Well,
Bill Perk and Bucky and all you guys, it makes you think about life, how life works. And these guys you're standing on the shoulders of giants. You've met a giant, guys. Working all his life to help people and teach architecture and to teach people different ways of thinking. And yeah, one day he's going to need to retire and one day he's going to pass. That's just how life is. But let's get these ideas in you and you share them. And then Jon Davey never dies. His ideas live on. Same with Bill Perk. That guy's never going to die. That guy has touched so many people. That's how you don't die. You share these good ideas, you meet people, and your ideas continue, and people always, I'll be thinking about Bill Perk forever. Man, we have some fun times. Gosh, did we have some fun times. Woo!
The dome over by the Gaia Center, that was originally designed for the pastor or rabbi who was going to run the center to live. That then became, in Carbondale in the late 60s, early 70s, was a big drug capital. And you could go downtown, you sit on the concrete ledge by the Dairy Queen, that's where you would score LSD or other things like that. But then when kids took some bad acid, they would go down to Synergy, the dome behind that house, and that was where it was a trip tent. So that you go in there and you're having a bad experience, somebody would be there to talk you down and guide you through it, which I thought was crazy.
Yeah. That's like Thaddeus Gold's book. So one of the questions that came out, I love when you guys ask questions because that's where it starts, conversation starts. But I said, what's one of your favorite books? Or like Lazy Man's Guide to Enlightenment. Have you read The Lazy Man's Guide to Enlightenment?
No.
Tiniest book, man. It's like this big, only about that thick, and it's about this guy. He's talking about how all you ever need to do, the only decision you need to make about anything is whether you're going to love it or not. And they just need to radiate love. And he talks about people tripping and says, you're tripping. Just try to radiate, just wherever you're at, try to radiate some love. And it'll start you on the right path. And it's the whole book's about radiating love. And that got me thinking that, because Bucky asked us, what is our function in universe? What is our function? Now he says local universe problem solvers. Well, I go one step further. So what do human beings do different than any other animal that we've come across on the planet? And I think that we can purposefully radiate love. Mm-hmm. So I think we're information gathering, love radiating beings. And that, again, once you're in an environment where life can be nice, we have an easier, more able chance to radiate more love towards people. But there's also that saying that you can't teach a hungry person about God. Like right now they're thinking about food. So it's the idea that once we get them to those basic levels of their needs met, maybe we can get them to radiate some love. And maybe that'll just change this planet because there's something bigger. That's one thing you learn about Bucky is he talked to the other idea about synergy.
Right.
Okay. Now, most people think synergy is when, the five of you get together and put your ideas together and you create more than just one person. Mm-hmm. Imagine this. I usually, when I do my talks, I keep three mason jars. Imagine someone shows you an empty, like what looks to be an empty mason jar. And they show you another mason jar, looks to be completely empty. One's got hydrogen in it, one's got oxygen in it. In your wildest imagination, could you imagine that if you poured those two things together, a massive amount of energy is going to be released and water is going to be created? That's synergy. Two gases clear gases that you can't see much of, and they're gases. You put them together. Massive amounts of energy and water. That's synergy. Whole systems unpredicted by their parts. Someone showed you an acorn in a pile of dirt, and you'd never seen a tree before. Would you ever, in your wildest imagination, think that that acorn, with a little bit of dirt and maybe some water, gets turned into a massive tree? That's what synergy is. So sometimes when I'm down, I just remember Bucky's synergy. It says, at any moment, this place could become, who knows what? Great things can happen. Things that I can't even fathom could happen. Don't give up. Great things can happen and will happen. But when we're ready, suppose we got in time when we're ready, I suppose. But that's what synergy is. Big. These are the ideas Bucky was having. When I was telling you, we're talking about Elon Musk. I'm like, wait, Bucky had big ideas. Like synergy. You can't even fathom, what could be. But it's all around us. But it's also easy. Here it is. That's how nature does it all, right here.
Well, gentlemen, I need to.
Yeah, we're keeping you.
Go to the store.
Great afternoon.
Thank you guys.
Thank you
for
so
coming
much.
down.
Thank you.
More than welcome anytime.
Yeah.